Listen, do not buy the snake oil. Do not trust Shabana Mahmood's new protest crackdown, because it seems to me it is a tyrant's Trojan horse. Well, this coming Tuesday marks 2 blood-soaked years since Hamas terrorists unleashed hell on Israel, slaughtering 1,200 innocent people, men, women, babies, in a frenzy of barbaric murder. And what did some of the pro-Gaza zealots in our country do? Show solidarity? Condemn Hamas? Nope. Before Israel could even draw breath, they scrambled to book central London for their first of many hate carnivals. That alone unmasks their vile hypocrisy, in my opinion. But since then, we've endured endless weekends of poison parades snaking through our capital and beyond. Now, I want to make it clear, I'm not saying everyone who supports Gaza is harmful, but unfortunately, we've seen some of this, haven't we? Nazi salutes. We've also seen anti-Semitic banners spewing disgusting filth on our streets.
Let's do it for Palestine, Ramallah, West Bank, Gaza. It's about time we globalize the Intifada.
Crowds chanting Intifada and Jihad, as you just saw. And we saw these scenes prior to October 7th too, didn't we? Today, many will be forgiven for applauding Shabana Mahmood's tough new powers to crush repetitive protests. But I think they couldn't be more wrong. This is no shield against the hate mob. It has the potential to be a new weapon of tyranny, a gun aimed at your voice, a Trojan horse primed to bulldoze protests at migrant hotels long before it even touches a single Gaza hate march. Why? Because it seems the police already hold the keys to ban them if they wanted to. The rules are quite clear. A march can be banned if there is a serious threat of public disorder. Well, why don't we try the 1,000 arrests since the slaughter began? Or 40 in one night, right after a terror attack on our soil against the Jewish community? If that's not serious and consistent disorder, I don't know what is. And don't forget, the police have shut down demos at illegal migrant hotels before. In Canary Wharf, they put a moratorium on protesting there by some groups for 30 days. And in Epping, you can't protest outside the Bell Hotel past 9 p.m. Yet, the Gaza weekly witch hunts, well, they've remained untouched. The sacred cows of our left-wing establishment, aren't they? Skeptics among us might suggest that successive governments have allowed some of these intimidating and I think anti-Semitic marches to continue untouched. Why? They might suggest that it's to weaponise our fury, manufacturing consent for a free speech guillotine against those the blob politically despise. And don't let your very fair outrage, by the way, at these far-left fanatics blind you to the real plot. And if you doubt me, why don't you scour the last 72 hours of social media and try and find a single senior Labour voice condemning and damning the far-left thuggery on our streets over the last few days? And when you've done that, tell me this. Do you really trust the cabal in this government to unleash these powers on the most hateful protesters at some of these marches? Or do you think there's a chance they will turn the screws on you, the everyday Brits, terrified for your kids' future, protesting fairly, daring to demand borders and safety for women and children? Well, joining us now is former police officer Graham Wetton. Graham, thank you so much for joining me. I am quite terrified of these new protest laws, and I will just say this before we start. I will always defend the right to free protest in this country, even if I vehemently, maybe saw the video at the start of this, people screaming and shouting at me, giving me abuse all day yesterday. I will still defend those people's rights to protest. I am worried that we're going down a route of tyranny, and it's a slow creep there, and that skeptics might say that actually we're weaponising fury.
Evening, Alex. I heard what you said. I actually think this has been needed for some time now. Remember, the Public Order Act was written in 1986, and Section 11 of the Public Order Act actually requires people to give the police 6 days' notice before a march or procession. That's very rarely done. As you mentioned already, there was an emergency demo, I think, last Thursday night. And marches, processions are dealt with slightly differently than assemblies. I think the legislation does need, I think the Home Secretary referred to loopholes. It does need tidying up. The difference there is it needs to be applied evenly and fairly to all groups, not just directed to one particular group. But there have been far too many, I think, of these processions and marches on a far too frequent basis in the last 2 years.
Graham, I understand that, and I really do understand the feeling in this country that protests are just taking over our lives and that they're becoming more and more divisive. My worry is that actually, having looked at this, the lack of statements, I mean, when we had the United Kingdom rally, 25 people were arrested. I condemned those 25 people for causing violence and attacking our police. 40 people arrested the other night, the same night of a terror attack in our country. Those 40 people, I condemned them, but nothing from the Labour government, nothing from the senior officials across our country. So I'm worried that this law will be weaponised to only stop protests of certain groups. Is there any guarantee that that won't happen?
I'd like to think that the policing doesn't normally get involved in politics, left or right wing, etc. And all the time our police protest, it didn't matter which group was protesting. We applied the law, I felt, evenly and fairly on every occasion. Politicians can pass the laws. The police then actually apply them, and it depends how you apply them based on the group you're policing at the time and either the risk or threat of serious disorders you've mentioned that's likely to occur. That's when you decide to use either one or several of the tactics and powers that are available to you. So it's up to the police to decide operational decisions, but we do need the politicians to give us some of the powers to make those operational decisions that make the rest of society feel safer and allow communities to come out on the streets and feel safe while lawful, peaceful protests are taking place.
My final brief question to you, Graham, is that when we look at the protest that happened on Thursday, the night of a terror incident, which I think was deplorable for anyone to do that, and again, I will always defend people's right to protest, but I think there's a time and place, and I do agree with the Home Secretary that it was a very un-British thing to do. Why did we not, at that point, the police go, do you know what, this could lead to serious disorder, there's been a terror attack tonight, there could be Jewish people that go out and go, do you know what, I've had enough. Why would the police not utilise the existing powers to shut that protest down?
Because that was an assembly, and the power to ban protests is for marches and processions. That's where the difference comes in the Public Order Act, and I think that's the loophole the Home Secretary is referring to. Marches and processions, the police can apply for a ban. That application goes to the Home Secretary, but it has to be based then on legal footings, i.e. the likelihood of serious disorder that any imposition of conditions on the march isn't going to prevent. And that would be challenged in courts. Even if you do ban it, as we've seen already with the groups that come out on Saturday, even if it is an offence to come out and march or assemble, we've still seen people willing to come out and commit offences. So you still need to police that and have sufficient resources to then, if need be, as we saw on Saturday, make arrests. And that took 1,500 officers on Saturday. So again, huge impact on police resources.
Well, Graham Weston, thank you for joining me and giving us those really important insights on this really important topic to the country right now. Former police officer there, Graham Weston, thank you for coming on the show. Adam, I'll start with you. You've been to a lot of protests recently. And I understand what Graham's saying, and I do think that police sometimes struggle to make decisions that could stop. We could have stopped some of these protests going ahead, and I think actually, if the consciences of the people who are running these assemblies or protests, whatever we want to call them, they should have done the right thing and not had a protest on the night of a terror attack. What do you make of the change of these laws?
Look, I think we're in very dangerous territory from what the Home Secretary is saying, that it could be used against people like me that are maybe outside migrant hotels peacefully protesting. Let's just remember that less than 48 hours after a terrorist event where innocent Jews were slaughtered on the streets of Britain, we had people in favour of Palestine Action, which is a defined terrorist group. People keep saying they're harmless. At the end of the day, they were arrested, many of the organisers, for going into a military installation with sledgehammers, hammers, whips and axes. At the end of the day, they were deemed a terrorist organisation for a reason that never gets spoken about. So people that are supporting these are also, in my mind, quite dangerous. So look, it's a matter of respect. If a migrant was hurt 2 days before I was going to protest, or there was a tragic event at a migrant hotel, I wouldn't protest because I've got morals and I know what's right and wrong. They should have stopped this. They should have put a statutory instrument through Parliament for a temporary ban this weekend. Look, 400 odd arrests. There was police that were attacked. There were signs that were threatening Zionists and Jews. That is despicable. And yet our Prime Minister and our Mayor of London does not call that out, but they want to call out 20 or so idiots that were at the United Kingdom march. The hypocrisy and the double standards shows that we are living in two-tier Britain.
Chloe?
Look, I think we can all agree that the right to protest is important and needs to be protected, but I do think that protests should have some restrictions. We already have some. I mean, Just Stop Oil, we said you can't just block all the roads indefinitely, that we're not going to play ball with that. There need to be some restrictions, and I do think that these marches it's been every single Saturday, week after week after week, for 2 years now. And even if you just think of it on a cost and resources basis, think how much more money and resources the Met Police would have to solve things like knife crime if these marches weren't going on every single week. I want these people to have the right to protest, but I don't think it has to be every single week, especially at this point. They could say once a month, and you can say, oh, maybe they'll use it inappropriately against the wrong people, but I think you need to be really, really clear in the legislation on that they have to, if the Met Police are going to restrict a certain group on a certain day from protesting, they need to clarify very clearly exactly why, and perhaps then justify that against decisions they've made against other protests on the other flip side of the political spectrum, to show they're consistent, so they don't face these accusations of two-tier policing.
Samuel, I'm still concerned. I hear what you're saying, Chloe, and I really do hear. And having gone to these protests, I don't have sympathy for the people who are going to them. I know they're going to go and get arrested, but I will still defend their right to do it. And whilst it does take our public resources, and I want the police to be well resourced and to be focusing on crime, it is a right on this country to protest. My concern is, no matter what political side you sit on, we could go down a very slippery slope in saying, actually, because of this terrorist attack, which is awful, the government could go, do you know what, we should use this as an opportunity to crack down on protesting because people are just outraged at the moment. That's my worry.
And I think that's a very, very valid worry to have. It ceases to be a right to protest if it's done on essentially at the permission of the British government, who, in this case, the people are actually protesting against. But I think on a wider point, and specific to the demonstration in the last couple of days, it's incredibly, in my opinion, incredibly irresponsible to conflate the lives and security and safety of British Jews with the actions of Israel, which is what the demonstration the other day was actually about. And as a British Jew, I do actually very much resent that there is actually a tie between being a Jew and actually making Israel essentially have a level of impunity from its conversation, from any sort of like conversations that are critiquing what it's been doing over the last 2 years, and particularly the British government's role in supporting the military operations, which many genocide scholars and organisations have labelled as a genocide, or certainly other war crimes. But no, you're right. When you have the government naming the time and the place and other restrictions, it ceases to be a right, and it's a very slippy slope.
Samuel, would you stand next to someone on one of these marches that says, what threatens Zionists, physical action against Zionists, kick a Zionist? Would you happily stand next to that sign on one of these protests?
I don't understand the framing of your question.
I think so. So there have been placards. We showed some of in the intro there. We showed some footage of people who were clearly being anti-Semitic. I saw some pictures of some of the placards that have been around these protests, and I think whilst fundamentally I completely disagree with everything you said, particularly on these protests, I will always defend your right to go and protest. But what I won't say is, on the night of a terrorist attack, where clearly it was targeted at the Jewish community. It was very obviously targeted at the Jewish community. To embolden a group of people that have been associated with anti-Semitism, we have seen acts of it. We gave some evidential footage there as well. Is it just not, it's completely inappropriate of that night to go, do you know what, I think we should just call it off. Because if one person comes with a placard that says something stupid, we're going to go down in history for supporting anti-Semitism. And I think that is the distinction. And what the Home Secretary said about being un-British is right, because British people don't go and do these things when they know it's a time to unify our country. And I think what would have really helped the Palestinian cause or the Gaza cause was to go, we are in solidarity with you. How can you be in solidarity with one group and not the other when these horrible things?
Well, I think it's really important to point out that a lot of these actions are Jewish-led, that there are Jews who do take part in these demonstrations and indeed have been arrested for supposed terror crimes, including the descendants and actual Holocaust survivors who are now facing terror charges. So I think, it's important to always to point out, as you've said about the Tommy Robinson marches, the actions of a few do not personify the entire march, and there will always be individuals who do often make the headlines, unfortunately. But the wider cause here, the other day, as I said, was British citizens being detained on the flotilla illegally after being intercepted in international waters by Israel. That was the demonstration. That is a timely demonstration.
Can I put a scenario to you?
Yeah.
Let's say there was a terrorist attack on a migrant hotel, but there was a planned rally by Tommy Robinson, a Unite the Kingdom rally, the same day, and he says, do you know what, we're going to go ahead with it. And what you get is scenes of jubilation, people flying British flags. Can you see how that would look horrible? Not that there's any association with Tommy Robinson and a terrorist attack on an illegal migrant hotel. Can you see how that would look bad?
The right to protest.
Do you think it would look bad?
I have my opinions on Tommy Robinson, but what I will always defend is people's right to go and protest without having the say-so and permission of the government.
I agree with you on that. I totally agree with you on that.
What's right is right and what's wrong is wrong. If there was a terrorist attack or a terrible incident at a migrant hotel 2 days before I was meant to go and protest, I would not go and protest out of respect for maybe someone that's lost their life or their families or for the whole situation. And to know that the world would be looking at me for my behaviour, I would be putting a good message out there to say I'm showing some respect. They didn't show any respect on Thursday night, and they shouldn't have protested at the weekend either.
Yeah, I think it was disrespectful. I think that there are plenty of people at those protests who are simply criticising Israel's actions, but I think a lot of Jews feel that there are a significant number of anti-Semitic people at those protests. I went to one of them and they were chanting from the river to the sea consequently, which a lot of people would say is a call to murder all of the Jews that live in Israel.
Completely disagree with that.
But a lot of Jews feel very intimidated and uncomfortable, scared to come into central London, and you think on the day that Jews are probably feeling the most terrified that they've ever been in this country since they came here to seek refuge from the Holocaust, that maybe it would be respectful to just call it off for one day. One day.
I certainly agree with that. I also agree that the government should never have the right to tell us when we should and shouldn't protest. I personally think it showed a really deep vileness about some of these protests by the fact that they went ahead on Thursday up and down the country. I think the British public will make their minds up about that, and that's why I would defend their right to do it. I think it was an awful, awful, awful thing to do, and I agree with the Home Secretary. It was un-British. I still think she should have stepped in and gone, if we care so much about unity, we care so much about diversity, we will ban the march tonight, and if people go out and do it, the police will protect Jews. The Keir Starmer did say he would do everything he could, and I think that probably has crossed consensus.
Just a quick reminder.
Very briefly.
Keir Starmer said he wouldn't want a migrant hotel in his town. So why is it OK to have one in our town?
Oh, well, that's a good point. Well,
OK.
Look, a spokesperson for the NEU said in speaking to the rally in 2021, Mr. Kebede called for peace and justice in the Middle East and expressed solidarity with the Palestinian people. He used the slogan, "Globalise the Intifada," which is an expression of such solidarity and of support for civic protest. It did not convey any support for violence.